Hello guys, welcome back to Audible Odyssey. So let's step into a world of immersive storytelling where gripping tales of mystery, horror and adventure come to life. Each narration is crafted to pull you into the heart of the story, creating an unforgettable audio experience. From spine-tingling horrors to timeless classics, Audible Odyssey Adventures is your gateway to thrilling journeys beyond imagination. Subscribe now, and let the stories take you to places you've never dreamed of. Audible Odyssey Presents. My dreams have always been vivid and intense. For better or for worse, some people have told me they never dream, or they have dreams but never remember what they're about. My dreams were like movies, complete with complex characters and dynamic plots. I created entire worlds with my dreams. I have lived my entire lives. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. On the other hand, there were times that I had such petrifying nightmares that I thought I would never feel safe in my own room again. I recall waking up to find that my mother's head had transformed into that of an alligator, and she chased me around the room until she cornered me, screaming that she wanted to eat my inside. It sounds strange now, but I remember waking up in a cold sweat, and it was a week before I would let my mother hug me again. Most of the time, though, I loved dreaming. I'm a writer, so I love to draw upon my dreams as inspiration. I felt like my imagination was unleashed while I was asleep. My subconscious could take my imagination to destinations that were otherwise unreachable. My waking imagination was a horse-drawn carriage, and my dreaming imagination was a starship. I used to wish I could live my life in that half-awake state between consciousness and reality that was before. When it all began, my father had died a year earlier in a car accident. I was there when it happened. I was riding in the passenger seat of a car with him, and we were talking and laughing like we had done 1,000 times. There was the road ahead, and then there was a semi-truck, and then we were upside down. I spent one night in the hospital, so did my father. I woke up the next morning. My father didn't suffice to say it was tough, but a year later I felt more or less okay. There were good days and bad days, but I really surprised myself at how well I handled the loss. You see, I dream pretty frequently of my father. Probably that's normal. The loss was never far from my mind, and being the vivid dreamer that I am, it was only natural that he should make an appearance. I wish that these dreams were of happier times, but to be honest, the dreams were unsettling. The problem was in my dreams. I knew my father was dead, and yet I saw him and spoke to him. It's not like I knew I was dreaming, and I don't remember thinking he was a ghost either. It's hard to explain. Every time I knew my father was dead, and I also knew that he was right there. But in my dreamlike state, the logical part of my brain never penetrated the contradiction that he was both dead and alive, and it never occurred to me that this was impossible. Both were correct. This was profoundly frustrating. I can remember him driving a car with me in the passenger seat. Ominous, I know, but I honestly wasn't thinking that at the time. My first thought actually was, "Dad, you're dead. I really don't know if you should be driving." I said this to him. He didn't seem to hear me, so I didn't say anything for a while because I didn't want to offend him. Then my father turned to me, looking at me with eyes that displayed no emotion or recognition. He looked at me but didn't really see me. His face in that moment still haunts me, because when my father was alive there was always some sort of emotion, love, pride, failing that there was at least frustration, anger, sadness, or weariness. He showed none of that. He was utterly blank. His voice, too, sounded unlike him when he spoke, totally devoid of any emphasis or dynamism. He said, "You shouldn't be here. What you shouldn't be here." I shouldn't, but Dad, I remember feeling my voice cracking with emotion even in my dream state. "Dad, you're the one who shouldn't be here. You have to wake up now." Just like that, I was jolted awake by a harsh noise. In the movies, you always see people waking from a nightmare and sitting bolt upright in their beds with their eyes wide and their brows sweating. I'm sure I didn't do that exactly, but that's what I felt like as my bulging eyes frantically scanned my bedroom. Something had woken me up. Something or someone had made a noise and woken me. It sounded almost like a snipping sound. My eyes were adjusted to the dark, but I didn't see anyone else in my room. I live with cats, but I didn't see them. Even when I turned on the lights and searched the hallway, nothing. I looked at my clock at midnight. I always struggled to get back to sleep. Once I'd woken up, I tried to go back to sleep, but all I got was the aggravation of an insomniac desperate for rest that would not come. I couldn't drift off again, and my alarm screamed at me. Hours later. What kept me awake? It wasn't the dream of my father. It wasn't the pressure of getting needed rest before a busy day at the office. It was that sound I distinctly heard. It was the sound a pair of shears makes, but 20 times louder. I figured it must have been in my dream, but no, I was certain it had happened in my bedroom. The sound was right next to my ear. The next day at work, I doubled my usual intake of coffee, and I still kept nodding off at my desk. My bloodshot eyes made me look like I was hungover, but my coworkers were kind enough not to say anything. Even a year after my father's passing, they still forgave me for being a little disheveled from time to time. Even my boss said nothing when he stopped by my office, though he did give me a once-over that made me feel self-conscious I hadn't bothered to shower or press my shirt as I usually did each morning. That evening, my roommate John and I were sitting around having a few beers and playing video games. His bedroom is right next to mine, so I asked if he'd seen anything peculiar the night before. He said, "I don't know dude, like what do you think I might have heard? It was like a snip." Yeah, I wanted him to tell me I was crazy or that I must have been dreaming, but instead he said the worst possible thing. "Yeah, I heard something that woke me up too." I paused the game. "Yeah, when do you think that would have happened? Around midnight?" He nodded. Yeah, I definitely heard something around then. I couldn't quite place what it was. I figured it was a cat or one of you guys. It sounded like a snipping noise. I couldn't really tell. He replied, "But it sounded like it came from your room." I felt pins and needles begin in my chest and prick their way down my arms and legs. I swallowed hard, trying not to betray any sort of emotion in my face. Suddenly, John broke into a goofy grin and relief washed over me. I punched him in the arm. "You idiot, ow dude," he said, laughing. "Sorry, you just make it too easy, right bro? Noises happen at night." It was probably the goddamn cats that night. I was dreamy again, but not of my father. God, I wish I'd dreamy of something else. I recognized the setting. It was clearly my house at night. The strange thing was, I didn't have the sense that I was myself, but rather that I was observing from somewhere far away. Having an out-of-body experience, my view was from the middle of the living room looking through the door into the kitchen. For several moments there was no sound but the ticking of a clock. I tried to move but couldn't so much as look around. I tried to speak but couldn't even move my lips again. Even though I could see clearly. I had the sense that I wasn't really myself but a silent observer. This gave me a despairing sense of helplessness. My eyes were open to something I didn't want to see. Then I heard a metallic jostling noise. Someone was jiggling the knob of our back door. They were trying to turn it, but they couldn't quite get the door to open. It was locked. No, if that were the case, they wouldn't be able to turn the knob at all, so why the struggle? I was incapable of blinking, but even if I could, I'm sure my eyes would have been locked on the scene. The knob turned, the door opened just a crack, then it swung open in full. What I saw is etched in my mind. To be honest, I'm struggling to tell you this as I recall the numb sense of horror I felt as I beheld the thing for the first time. The creature was almost human. It had 2 legs, 2 arms, and it stood at about my height, but I could conceive that any human could endure the anguish of this thing's existence. It was naked and its skin was very pale and covered in cuts of varying length and depth. Some looked like years-old scars and some of the wounds were one day fresh. The thing's age was impossible to know. It might have been 30 years old or 90. Its physique made it seem male, but it had no genitals. It was also lacking nipples, a belly button, or any visible hair. Its feet were devoid of toes. Looked like a pair of milky white potatoes, and the thing seemed to struggle to remain upright as it walked. 3 fingers had been removed from each of its hands, leaving only the index and the thumb of each of these held 2 pairs of shears which were jagged, rusty, and nearly 2 feet long. Every so often, one of its hands would twitch and it would snip the air, with a sound that seemed to deafen me, even though it came from such a small thing. As terrifying as those weapons were to behold, it was nothing compared to the face. Its ears, nose, and eyelids had been cut off, leaving gaping holes in their stead. Its eyes were bloodshot and dry as a result. Worst of all, its mouth had been snipped at the corners, giving an unnatural, unending grin. The thing made no noise as it stalked through the kitchen, snipping the air and shuffling along on its mutilated feet. I could do nothing but stare, taking in every inch of the thing's lean, grotesque body. Suddenly my perspective changed like the feed from a security camera system. I was following the creature as it stalked through my home. It walked uncertainly like a toddler or a drunk and seemed to almost fall once or twice, but it never lost its footing as it maneuvered around the living room furniture at the bottom of the stairs. It seemed to linger for a fraction of a moment, but then it took its first step up and then its next. I watched from just behind the thing as it ascended, and on each step it would snip one of its 2 long shears. Oddly, the steps never creaked even as they stopped and stumbled. The only sound was the irregular snipping noise. My next perspective was of the top floor of my house, but it seemed like the roof had been removed. I could see both the upstairs hallway and the inside of my bedroom. I even saw myself sleeping soundly in my own bed. Slowly the creature came into view as it reached the top of the steps. At this point, even my disembodied state panic set in because I knew I was the creature's target. The shears hungered for blood and I was to be their sustenance. I willed myself, pleaded with myself to wake up and see the danger, or for my silent spirits to repossess my body so I could flee. The thing stopped just outside my bedroom. I was screaming in my mind to wake up, to run away. Perhaps I heard my pleas because my body grunted softly and rolled to the side. The thing was right by my door. Now slowly its right arm came up, raising its shears to its face, and an impossibly red tongue slithered out of its 2 wide mouths, licking the blade of the shears before taking them between its teeth. Its hand was freed of this burden. It wrapped its thumb and forefinger around the knob of my door. It seemed to shudder with excitement and its left hand twitched abruptly. I was in my bed again. I was drenched in sweat, yet I pulled the covers all the way up to my chin and slammed my back against the wall, cowering. My eyes were locked on the doorknob. I couldn't be certain, but in the dark I thought I could see it moving ever so slightly. I strained my ears for a sound that would confirm my fears of the jostling of my doorknob, or worse, the thirsty sound of those ruthless shears. I stared at the door unblinkingly for an hour, and sleep was the farthest thing from my mind. After that, I could move enough to turn on my bedside. I finally thought of picking up my cell phone and calling John, who was sleeping next door. He sounded annoyed until I told him there was someone in the house. Even though I protested, he got up out of bed and looked around for me. As you've probably guessed, there was no sign that anyone had been there, just another one of my hauntingly vivid dreams. I thought I was embarrassed that I dragged poor John out of bed over it. I felt stupid rather than scared, but I still didn't sleep. The next day, I was almost too tired to even go over to my girlfriend's house, but I dragged myself over and we relaxed on her couch watching a dumb movie. Brooke was always easy to talk to, so I described my dream to her and she said when I'd finished, and that made me laugh. Man, that was a bad one. I said, I mean, nightmares always just sound dumb in the retelling, but this one really got to me. I call him the Midnight Man. No, I believe you, that sounds awful. I shook my head. I thought I was done with all that. I haven't had a bad one like that since I was a kid. For a moment, she didn't say anything. I thought that meant the conversation was over, but then she asked if I ever told you I used to have night terrors. I was surprised. No, it's a bit different from having a nightmare. I remember feeling not that I'd imagined something awful, but that something was coming for me. I remember thinking that I was going to die even if I couldn't point to how she looked into my eyes. Are you still dreaming about your dad? I blinked twice and nodded. Sometimes we all have our demons. I think in dreams they show themselves in the worst ways, with a lump in my throat. All I could say was yeah. Instead of saying anything more, I pulled her into my arms. We spent the evening in each other's embrace, but we both had an early morning, at work, so I didn't spend the night. I went home. I went to sleep because that's what wakes me. My eyes are heavy from 2 sleep-deprived nights and I almost drift off again, but I don't. Something is wrong. It's not a sound this time, no, it's musk. It's the smell of a sunbathed dog and it fills the whole room. It's an itch in my nose that scratches at my consciousness until I open my eyes and I scream. The monster is right there. It's standing over me, smiling, its slit mouth smiling, its lidless bloodshot eyes boring straight into mine. The thing is in my room and it's here to kill me. It's right there. I scream and cry louder than I ever have before and I feel my throat going hoarse. I pray that someone will hear me and come to rescue me. Somehow. I know that I will not be heard. I start scrambling to get up, but when I try to move, a searing stabbing pain spreads from my wrists to my brain. My eyes snap to my wrists and the sight brings bile bubbling to the back of my throat. My arms are stretched out to my sides and each of my wrists is pinned to the headboard with a pair of those long rusty shears. My first instinct was to try and pull free, but even the slightest twitch of my arms causes a jolt of pain that attacks my entire nervous system. I was in agony. This had to be a dream. I told myself it must be because this creature could not exist. It must not exist. If horror like this exists in the world, then I'd be a fool, forever feeling happy and safe. If this is how I was always meant to die, then what was the point of living? Though the monster shears had been employed to drain my lifeblood from my wrists. It somehow materialized 2 more and the monster looked me up and down, twitching and snipping hungrily. Its eyes lingered on my blooded arms and the sight of the carnage seemed to excite it. Its lips peeled back to reveal yellow teeth and a blood-red tongue. It seems to be considering what to do with me next. I'm pleading unintelligibly, begging it to let me go or for this nightmare to end, but to no avail. The thing cannot, or, more likely, will not hear me if my screams seem to entice it further. Its lips pulled back and its jaw hanging loose in a silent cackle. It leant in as though to get a closer look at my tear-stared face. The wet dog smell pervades my senses. I gag and the thing leans in closer and closer with both of its feet still firmly planted on the ground. It seems impossible that the thing should be able to lean so far toward me without tumbling down on top of me. Still it still does, and it inhales my scent through the slits that used to be its nose. The thing reverts to its upright position as the creature steps away from me. I dare to feel an iota of relief, but it flutters away as the creature slowly falls to its knees at the foot of my bed. The creature slowly raises the shears in its left hand up to its face. Its red tongue snakes out from between its lips and licks the blades tantalizingly. It then takes the shears between its teeth and with its freed hand it snatches my right ankle up with its thumb and forefinger. The icy cold grip of its spindly fingers is impossibly strong. I kick and kick, but the creature is utterly unfazed. I used my other foot to kick at the monster's forearm. This causes pain to shoot up from my wrists as my body gets jostled around, but the monster only grins wider, its grip tightens, nearly crushing my ankle. I can only whimper pitifully. It takes about a dozen good cuts and then my foot rips free. I scream and scream as I watch the thing raise my appendage into the air like a trophy. My stomach finally gives and my vision clouds from the pain and blood loss. I can feel myself growing cold, but even now the thought of death is secondary to the horror of this creature. The monster's jaw drops open, allowing its other pair of shears to clatter to the floor. It opens its cut mouth impossibly wide, revealing all of its teeth and that gory tongue. It manages to jam my entire foot into its mouth, and it begins to chew its yellow teeth, make quick work of its bones, and all as ink consciousness takes me, all I can hear is a horrendous crunching as I fade to blackness. I woke up screaming and thrashing around, and 2 nurses had to come in and restrain me so I didn't tear out for it took a good 5 minutes for me to understand that I was in hospital. It was another 10 before my breathing slowed. My heart was still palpitating when the doctor came in to see me. After a brief exchange of pleasantry, she asked me, "Do you remember what happened?" I told her, and she didn't seem to believe me. "How did I get here?" I demanded. Who found me? Is that thing still in the house?" The doctor grabbed my arm to check my fore and the bandages on my wrists. "I'm afraid you're a bit delusional. That's nothing to be alarmed about. You're probably dehydrated and we have you on pain medication, so this is pretty normal. Are you sure you don't remember what happened?" "Yes," I exclaimed, though my exclamation was little more than a whisper. "I told you a monster." "There was no monster." "You don't remember the accident?" the doctor asked. "Accident?" She sighed. "You were in a collision with a truck. It knocked you off the road. Apparently the car rolled many times. You were lucky not to have been killed. You've been out for 3 days." I was shocked, but it made sense. Of course an accident. I didn't remember driving, but I must have been. Of course it made more sense than a creature with scissors devouring my foot. The doctor continued, "We had to make a difficult decision to keep you alive." Her eyes trailed down to my feet. I pulled the sheet up slightly and I felt the blood drain from my face. My bare left foot was exposed, and then I saw white bandages covering the stump end of my right leg. Before I could properly process this, my mother and sister came rushing in, and there were several minutes of tears, sobbing, and unending hugs. For minutes we just sat there and embraced, as we had far too many times that year. "Thank God you're okay," my mom said between racking sobs. "I didn't think you were ever going to wake up." "I didn't think I'm okay," I assured her. Even then I had to be the strong one. This sucks, but I'll get through this. We'll get through this." There was more crying and hugs. My sister was tearful but otherwise strangely quiet. I understood. I could only imagine what she and my mother had been going through the past 3 days. "We lost my father to a car accident just a year ago, and now they'd fa the very real possibility of losing me the same way." I was the one who broke the silence by saying, "The thing is, I don't even remember driving." My mom started wailing, suddenly inconsolable. "Strange," I thought. "Why did that of all things set her off?" She collapsed into my sister's chest. My sister, eyes red and wet, took her hand in mine. "You weren't driving," she said. I blinked a few times. Then who was my sister? Couldn't bear to look at me. In a choked voice she said, "Daddy's dead." I know," I replied. This set my mother going even worse. She was shaking, and so was my sister. She said, "What do you mean you know?" "I know I'm not delirious, whatever these doctors say. I know Dad died last year." My sister shook her head. "No, God, no. No, you couldn't. No, Dad didn't die last year. He died while you were still sleepy. He died last night." I couldn't believe it. I imagined or dreamed it all. A year of my life was gone. I've had to go through the entire grieving process and had to relive all of the tears and all the well wishes. This time it's been worse, though, because I'm different than I was, and no one can understand why. Regardless of what people told me, I felt that he'd been gone for a year. I tried to explain this to my sister, and she accused me of being callous. I'm sure my mother felt that way too, though she'd never said it. Since the accident, I've drifted through a perpetual fog of confusion. It seems like every other day or so, I learn that something I took for granted was a lie, and each time it's like waking up from another dream. I never got that promotion. I never published that story. Worse, my girlfriend never even existed. That was really the worst thing, even worse than losing my foot. I actually still miss her. My memories of her are still so clear and exquisite, though just like all dreams, they're fading with each passing day. Those memories are fading. What doesn't fade, what never fades, is the too wide smile of the midnight man as my foot disappeared down its bloody throat. I don't think I'll ever understand exactly what happened to me, though I think about it every day. The way I see it, there are three possibilities. 1. It really was all a dream and predicting my father's death was just some tragic coincidence. Personally, I have trouble accepting that. 2. I had some sort of dreaming premonition. Maybe I have the gift of foresight, although if that's the case, I've never experienced it before or since. I have trouble accepting that 3 creatures really did this to me, all of them manufactured that year of my life, prolonging my grief and my pain and in the end devouring a part of me. Maybe each scar that it carried on its marred body had a story. I've often wondered, did it mark itself this way to remember its victims? Maybe it's been doing this to people forever in a way it's never truly gone. Especially when I lay down to sleep at night, I've never exactly dream of the creature again, but the image of it is burned into my mind's eye and becomes visible whenever night falls. I can't bring myself to fall asleep before midnight now. I get much less sleep, but anything is preferable to the alternative, and the worst part is I can't tell anyone. Nightmares always seem so silly in the retelling, no one takes them seriously. But last night I dream of my father. It was he and I driving in the car on a sunny country road, and he looked at me with the eyes and soul of the dead. He told me that I have to wake up. So guys, the video has ended now. If you like our stories and want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to Audible Odyssey channel and do all these things, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Enjoy horror and adventure stories like this. So just subscribe to Audible Odyssey. Bye bye.